My daughter chose my 71st birthday to try to take everything from me. Not a random Tuesday, not some quiet afternoon when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She chose the day I turned 71, with the cake still on the counter and the balloons my neighbor had tied to the mailbox still bobbing in the October wind, to sit across from me at my own kitchen table and slide a manila envelope toward me like she was doing me a favor. "Mom," she said in that voice she'd been using for about 2 years by then, slow, a little too patient, the way you talk to someone you've already decided can't keep up. "We just need you to sign a few things." I looked at the envelope. I looked at her husband sitting next to her with his hands folded on the table. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised, who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms, who I had driven to every soccer practice and sat through every school play, and held at her father's funeral when she couldn't stop shaking. I did not pick up the envelope. "What's in it?" I asked. She smiled. "It's just a power of attorney for your finances, so we can help you manage things better." That word, manage, landed somewhere in my chest and sat there, cold and heavy. I had managed things just fine for 40 years. I had managed a household on a teacher's salary after my husband got sick. I had managed his medical bills and his funeral, and the mortgage and my own retirement, and every single decision that came after. But now I was 71, and apparently I needed to be managed. I told her I'd look it over. She said gently, "Don't wait too long, Mum. These things are important." After they left, I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The birthday cake was chocolate with cream cheese frosting, my favorite, the same kind I'd made for her every year when she was little. I hadn't eaten a single slice. Let me back up, because this didn't start that October. It started the year before, maybe even earlier than that, in ways I didn't fully recognize until later. My name is Irene. I live in the same house in Maplewood, New Jersey, where I raised my 2 children, my daughter Claire, who is 43, and my son Owen, who lives in Portland and calls me every Sunday without fail. My husband Raymond passed away 6 years ago from congestive heart failure. We were married 44 years. After Raymond died, I grieved hard and then I got up. That's what you do. I kept the house, kept my routines, kept my garden. I took a watercolor class at the community center. I joined a book club. I drove myself everywhere, cooked real meals, managed my own investments. Raymond had taught me well. We weren't wealthy, but we were careful. And the house was paid off, and I had a solid retirement account and a small rental property, a duplex 2 towns over, that brought in steady income every month. I was not, by any definition, a woman who needed to be managed. But Claire had married a man named Greg about 8 years ago, and Greg had, how do I put this, expensive tastes and a history of business ideas that never quite worked out. A sports bar franchise, an e-commerce company, something involving cryptocurrency that I never fully understood and didn't want to. Claire worked as a dental hygienist and made decent money, but they had 2 kids in private school and a mortgage on a house that had always seemed a size too big for their actual lives. I'm not saying that's why she did what she did. I don't entirely know what happened in my daughter's heart, but I know that the financial pressure in that household was real, and I know when the pressure started showing up at my door. It began with small things, comments about the house being a lot for one person, suggestions that I might be more comfortable somewhere smaller. One Sunday dinner where Greg mentioned, almost casually, that the rental property must be such a headache to deal with at my age, and that they'd be happy to take that off my plate. I said it wasn't a headache at all. I actually enjoyed the rental. My tenants, a young couple named the Garcias, were wonderful people who paid on time and kept the place clean and occasionally left tomatoes from their garden on the back porch. Greg nodded and said, "Still, something to think about." I thought about it. I thought he had some nerve. Then came the medical angle. I had a minor fender bender in the Safeway parking lot about 14 months ago. I tapped the car in front of me at maybe 3 miles an hour. No one was hurt. No airbags deployed. I exchanged insurance information, and went home and reported it to my agent that same afternoon like you're supposed to. But Claire heard about it from Owen, who had heard it from me because I'd mentioned it on our Sunday call. And by the time it got back to Claire, apparently it had become a significant incident that suggested I was losing my edge behind the wheel. She called me that week. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked if maybe it was time to talk to my doctor about cognitive testing. I told her my cognition was fine, thank you. Mom, she said, there's no shame in it. People get assessments all the time. It's just a precaution. I will keep that in mind, I said, which is something I say when I want to end a conversation. The phone calls got more frequent after that. Claire started asking detailed questions about my finances, not out of concern, I realized, but out of inventory. How was the rental doing? Had I thought any more about selling the house? Had I updated my will recently? What was the plan if something happened to me? I answered some questions and deflected others, but I noticed the pattern, the way you notice a smell you can't quite place, something slightly off, something that puts you on alert before your brain has finished naming it. The birthday envelope, though, that was when I understood what we were dealing with. After they left that October evening, I called my son. Owen listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, Mum, don't sign anything. Not yet. I wasn't planning to, I said. I know, he said. I just want to say it clearly. Don't sign. Ben, he said something that I wrote down on a notepad because I knew I'd need to remember it. He said, you need to talk to someone who isn't family, before anything else. He was right, and I knew exactly who to call. My oldest friend. We've been close since our children were in stroller together at the park. Her name is Dot. Dorothy Finch. She's sharp as a tack, retired now, but her son-in-law is a family law attorney in Summit. She'd mentioned him a dozen times over the years in contexts that had nothing to do with me. I'd never imagined I'd need him. I called Dot that night. I told her what happened. She didn't say I'm so sorry or I can't believe Claire would do that or any of the things you sometimes get from people who mean well, but aren't actually helping. She said, how soon can you meet with Martin? Martin Stokes had been practicing family and estate law for over 20 years. I met with him that following Thursday at his office in Summit. I brought the envelope still unsealed. He opened it, read it quietly, turned a few pages, then he looked up. Have you signed this? No. He nodded slowly. Good. This is a broad financial power of attorney. If you'd signed this, your daughter and her husband would have had the authority to make financial decisions on your behalf, including selling property. I'd suspected. Hearing it confirmed still felt like a fist around my lungs. What do I do? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. You get ahead of this, quietly. Over the next 3 months, Martin helped me do exactly that. First, I made sure my existing will and estate documents were in order. I had a will, but it was old, drafted when the kids were teenagers. Martin helped me update everything clearly and precisely with a new estate planning attorney he trusted. The rental property, the house, the retirement accounts, all of it accounted for, nothing ambiguous. Second, I went to my own doctor, not the one Claire had been subtly pushing me toward, and got a proper cognitive evaluation. I was not worried about the results. I was building a record. The assessment came back entirely normal. I got a copy of the report and kept it in a file folder in my home office. Third, I had a frank conversation with the Garcias. Not about Claire. I didn't want to worry them, but about the property itself. I quietly modified the rental agreement and made sure the lease renewal was handled in a way that made any quick sale significantly more complicated. Martin advised me on all of it. And fourth, I called Owen and told him everything I was doing, step by step. He flew in from Portland for a weekend in January. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Claire had slid that envelope across to me, and he looked at everything, every document, every step I'd taken. He had tears in his eyes at one point, though he tried not to let me see. You're something else, Mum, he said. Your father always said that. I told him. He meant it as a compliment. Owen laughed. That kitchen hadn't heard enough laughter since Raymond died. Throughout all of this, Claire was still calling, still coming by. She had started bringing Greg's mother, a woman named Sylvia, on some of the visits. I couldn't quite figure out why, unless it was meant to make the conversations feel more social and less like what they actually were. They would sit in my living room and drink the coffee I made and talk about the kids and the school play and the renovations they were planning. And there would always be a moment, usually around the second cup, where the conversation shifted. Have you thought any more about what we discussed? The house does need some work, Mom. Foundation issues can get expensive. You know, if you sold now, the market is still pretty strong in this area. Each time, I said something neutral and changed the subject. Inside, I was documenting everything. Dates, times, what was said, who was present. Martin had told me to keep a log, and I did. One visit in February, Claire came alone. She seemed different that day, quieter, more careful. She asked if she could see my will. I said, why? I just want to make sure you're protected, Mom. I'm protected? I said. Martin Stokes made sure of it. She went very still. Who's Martin Stokes? My attorney, I said. I've had him update all my documents. Everything's in order. She left about 20 minutes later. The goodbye hug was a little stiff. 2 days after that, Greg called me directly, which he rarely did. He was friendly, his voice doing that thing where it's warm on the surface and something else entirely underneath. He said he thought there might have been some miscommunication, and he hoped I didn't feel any pressure, and of course they only wanted what was best for me. I know, I said pleasantly. That's what I assumed. When we hung up, I wrote the call down in my log. Date, time, content. Martin had said, document everything. In March, Claire told me she'd made an appointment for me with a geriatric specialist at Overlook Medical Center. She hadn't asked. She'd just scheduled it and was telling me now, presenting it as something she'd done for me, a gift. I didn't ask for that appointment, I said. Mum, it's just a wellness check. It's important at your age. Claire. I kept my voice even. I have a primary care doctor I've seen for 11 years. I have had a full cognitive evaluation this winter. My health is fine and my mind is fine. I did not ask you to make this appointment, and I'm not going to keep it. She stared at me. I think she'd been expecting the version of me she remembered from a year ago, the mother who went quiet when things got uncomfortable, who smoothed things over to keep the peace, who had never once in our adult relationship pushed back hard enough to make her actually uncomfortable. That version of me was still here. She just had a file folder now. Why are you being like this? Claire said. Like what? Like I'm the enemy. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. Outside the window, my neighbor was walking her dog in the pale grey March light. The forsythia was just starting to come in along the fence line. Raymond had planted that forsythia the spring we moved in. You're not my enemy, I said, but you're not my guardian either. I need you to understand the difference. She left without finishing her coffee. I want to be honest about something. This was not easy. People ask how you hold your ground with your own child, and they imagine it must require some kind of armor, some cold, hard resolve that keeps you from feeling it. That's not how it was. Every conversation cost me something. Every time Claire left my house with that look on her face, hurt or angry or both, I sat with it afterward. I second-guessed myself. I wondered if I was making this worse, if there was some version of things where we could have just talked it through, if maybe she genuinely was scared for me in some way she didn't know how to express. I thought about calling her sometimes, just to talk. Not about any of it, just to talk the way we used to. About the grandkids, her work, something funny that happened. But the calls we'd been having lately were never just that, and I'd learned to hear the shape of a conversation before it arrived. Dot was the one who kept me steady. We'd meet for lunch at a diner near her house most Tuesdays, and I would tell her where things stood, and she would listen and then tell me what she actually thought, which I valued enormously. Some friends are kind. Dot was kind and honest, which is rarer. You're doing the right thing, she told me one Tuesday in April. I know it doesn't always feel like it. I raised her, I said. I was stirring my coffee even though I'd stopped adding sugar years ago. Old habit. I keep thinking about when she was little. She was such a good kid. Where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere, Dot said. She's scared and she's in financial trouble, and she made some choices that were wrong. That doesn't erase who she was, but it doesn't mean you hand over your life either. I nodded. Raymond would be furious, I said. Dot smiled. Raymond would have had Martin Stokes on speed dial the moment that envelope appeared. She was right. He would have. My birthday falls on the 14th of October. The following October, a full year after the envelope, I decided to host a birthday dinner at my house. Small. Just the people who mattered. Owen flew in from Portland. Dot came with her husband, Frank. My next-door neighbor, Sandra, and her husband came. They'd been friends since the kids were small. My tenant, Mrs. Garcia, brought tamales and refused to take no for an answer. And yes, I invited Claire. I thought about it for a long time before I did. Martin had said the legal side of things was fully protected now. There was nothing Claire or Greg could access or contest. Owen had said the choice was mine. Dot had said she'd support me either way. I invited her because she was still my daughter. Whatever had happened between us, she was still the little girl who fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. I wasn't ready to let that be the last thing we were to each other. She came alone. Greg had a prior commitment, she said, and I had the impression the prior commitment was the conversation she'd had with him before coming, the one where she told him she was going by herself. She brought me flowers, zinnias, which she knew I loved because I'd grown them in the garden every year of her childhood. We didn't talk about any of it that evening. We ate tamales and birthday cake, and someone put on old music, and Owen danced badly in the kitchen to make the grandchildren laugh. At one point, late in the evening, Claire came and stood beside me at the window while everyone else was talking. "The forsythia looks good," she said. "Your father planted it," I said. "It comes back every spring." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom, I'm sorry." It wasn't a long apology. It wasn't a complete one. There were things in it she skated past, and things she didn't fully own, and I noticed all of that. But it was real. I could hear that it cost her something to say it. "I know," I said. We stood there looking at the yard for a while longer. What happened after that I won't pretend was simple. We're still finding our way back. There are phone calls now that are just phone calls, no envelope underneath them. She came for Thanksgiving and helped me make the pie. Greg is cordial in a careful way that I understand and accept. We're not where we were, but we're not where we were a year ago either, and that is something to hold on to. What I want to say, if anyone out there is living something like this, if you're a woman over 60 and someone in your life has started talking to you in that slow, patient voice, if you've started feeling managed rather than loved, if someone has suggested, gently and reasonably, that you need help with things you've been handling your whole adult life, is this? Trust what you feel. That cold, heavy thing that settled in my chest when Claire slid that envelope across the table. That was real information. Don't talk yourself out of it because you love the person or because you've been the peacekeeper your whole life, or because making noise feels harder than going quiet. Get a good attorney, not a family friend who practices a different kind of law, a real estate and estate planning attorney who looks at your specific documents and tells you exactly what exposure you have. One meeting changed everything for me. Get your paperwork in order while you are clear-headed and healthy and no one is pressuring you. Don't wait until there's a crisis. The time to do it is when there is no emergency, so that when someone tries to manufacture one, you are already standing on solid ground. And call the person in your life who tells you the truth. I had Dot. I had Owen. I had my Tuesday lunches at that diner. You cannot do this alone, and you don't have to. I'm 72 years old now. I still drive myself everywhere. I still maintain this house. though I did finally hire someone to help with the gutters because Raymond always did those, and I never learned, and they were genuinely a nuisance. I still have my watercolor class and my book club and my tenants who leave tomatoes on the porch. I am not a burden. I am not a liability. I am not something to be managed or assessed or quietly transferred from one column to another in someone else's financial planning. I'm Irene. This is my house. I planted the garden and I know where the deed is kept. And the forsythia comes back every spring, just like Raymond said it would. I still think about that birthday cake. Chocolate with cream cheese frosting, my favorite for as long as I can remember, sitting on the counter while my daughter pushed a legal envelope across my kitchen table like it was a gift. I didn't eat a single slice that night. I just sat there after she left, looking at the forsythia Raymond planted, and I thought, this is a moment that will define something. What it defines is up to me. What happened to Claire didn't happen because she's a bad person. I don't believe that, and I never will. What happened is that she let fear and financial pressure quietly hollow out her sense of what was right, and she convinced herself, one small step at a time, that what she was doing was reasonable. That's how it usually works. Nobody sits down and decides to become someone who wrongs the people they love. They just stop paying attention to the voice that says this is right. They make one compromise, then another, and one day they're sliding an envelope across their mother's birthday table and calling it concern. That's the thing about character. It doesn't show up in the big moments first. It erodes in the small ones, in the private calculations nobody else sees, in the choices you make when you think the cost is low. Claire's choices had a cost. They cost her 2 years of a real relationship with me. They cost her my trust, which I am slowly, carefully rebuilding with her, but which will never be exactly what it was. Actions move in one direction and then they come back, changed, and you have to live with the version that returns. What saved me was not luck. I want to be clear about that. What saved me was that I paid attention to what I felt. I sought out someone who knew more than I did, and I did the hard, unglamorous work of preparing while there was still time to prepare. Martine didn't save me. Dot didn't save me. Owen's Sunday phone calls didn't save me. All of those things helped enormously, but the decision to act, to stop smoothing things over and start standing on solid ground, that was mine. Nobody can make that decision for you. I'm not a woman who went to law school or made a fortune or did anything the world would call remarkable. I taught 8th grade English for 31 years. I raised 2 children. I kept a house and a marriage and a small rental property and a garden. But I understood when the moment came that wisdom isn't about what you know. It's about knowing what you don't know and finding someone who does. That saved my financial life. And the courage to sit across from my own daughter and say no, clearly without apology. That saved something harder to name, something closer to the center of who I am. Raymond used to say the forsythia was the most reliable thing in the yard. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for ideal conditions. It just comes back every spring, because that is what it does. I think about that when I'm not sure I'm strong enough. Then I remember that I always have been.